Hey everybody, Jim Yord here with the Right Life Project. I wanted to talk today about managing emotional blow-ups, managing blow-ups of anger specifically. I'm sure everyone's had the experience of losing their temper with someone, whether it's their colleague, boss, friend, relative, and saying something that maybe you regret later and having that angry outburst really negatively affect the relationship. Those can be really toxic events in a relationship and can sometimes end a relationship. But it's not only in our personal lives where these emotional blow-ups cause damage. It does in society as well. You know, if you're watching from another country, I don't know, but here in the U.S., it's pretty clear that in the public sphere, you know, the discourse nowadays is really rough. It's acrimonious, you know. In my spare time, sometimes I will go to news sites and then scroll down and read the comments sections. This is something I should know by now not to do, because what exists in the comment section is not a discussion of issues. It's personal barbs back and forth with one another. And so whether it's in your personal life or in society as a whole, these kind of emotional, unthinking outbursts are really destructive, because what they do is serve to alienate us from other people. And that's a big problem for us as humans, because we're wired to be social creatures and connect in a positive way with other people. We know that neurobiologically, physiologically, psychologically, that we benefit from doing so. And so any behavior that serves to separate us from others or drive people away isn't really in our best long-term interest. So I want to be clear that anger itself isn't a problem. Anger is a natural human emotion. What I'm talking about is that kind of uncontrolled, unmanaged outburst that springs out of you and ends up causing pain to other people and ultimately yourself. But by the same token, holding anger bottled up inside isn't good for you in the long run either. It can sort of eat you up from the inside out and breed resentment. So this actually reminds me of, it's going to sound like a non sequitur, I know, but stay with me. Mount St. Helens, okay? I might be dating myself here, but I was, I think, about 8 or 9 when Mount St. Helens exploded. And it was a big deal. It was an enormous explosion. It blew the entire side of the mountain away and killed people and flattened the forest for miles around. And I saw a documentary not long ago about that event. And what I found really fascinating is that the scientists before the explosion noticed that the mountain was really sort of inflating, kind of like a balloon. So a mountain, of course, is made of solid rock. And so you'd think, well, how could it inflate like a balloon? You know, they could tell, of course, from this inflation that something bad was going to happen, because mountains aren't supposed to inflate. And what was happening was the magma was building up underneath the surface and forcing the rock out. But still, how can rock be that flexible, really? Well, it turns out that what had happened is, over the years, the hot lava, the magma down below, had forced water up through the rock, and this water had sort of soaked up acid and other chemicals that weakened the rock. And so the water would force up through the rock, kind of weaken it, drain back down, get forced back up the next time there was a lot of lava that was heating up, weaken the rock, and drain back down. So over many, many years, this cycle of rising heat and then not having its expression and then coming back down had actually served to weaken the rock significantly. And that's what ultimately enabled it to crack wide open and this explosion to take place that was so devastating to people. So this is similar to the process of how anger works in our bodies, in our minds. If we bottle it up over the long run, what we're doing is really just harming ourselves and precipitating an explosion in the future. You know, in Buddhism, there's a quote that's attributed to the Buddha that holding on to anger and resentment is like holding a hot coal in your hand and hoping that the other person gets burned, right? It's not going to work. All it does is ends up hurting you. So we don't want to bottle it up. We don't want to let it explode out of us wildly and cause damage. Okay, so now I tell that volcano story as a metaphor, of course, for this process of anger in our bodies, but it also is an apt metaphor for the way that I think about personal development in general and the way I work with my clients, which is that, you know, we all have these uniquely human needs and capacities that are really at our core. It's like our magma, if you will. And these exist in the psychological, vocational, social, and physical domains. These uniquely human needs and capacities that show up for each of us in our own way that need to be met and exercised in order for us to be truly happy rather than just experiencing pleasure momentarily. But a long-term lasting happiness comes from having these needs met and capacities, abilities exercised. And I'm going to be talking more about this in the next video next week. But when those needs and abilities are frustrated, when the needs go unmet and you're unable to exercise those abilities, that ends up causing pain, and then anger often comes in as a response to that pain. It's your primitive brain, your reptilian brain's response to discomfort. Okay? It comes in with a behavior that is intended to help that discomfort go away right now. So really, anger is just the superficial, at the surface, right? That's the actual lava spurting out the top of the volcano. It's the last step. It's the superficial manifestation of these processes that are going on underneath. And so I think of a lot of problems in personal development as being able to be worked on from two different directions, from the top down and the bottom up. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is a top-down approach to dealing with these emotional blow-ups. In other words, once you're feeling angry, what can you do to keep from lashing out in anger and causing damage to yourself and others? That's a sort of a behavioral approach. What to do once you're already feeling that way. Next week, I'm going to be talking more about taking a closer look at why it is you're getting angry so often in the first place and how to resolve the underlying issues so that we kind of cool off that volcanic activity and it stops forcing the magma to the surface in the first place. Okay? So, for today, though, the top-down tips. I'm going to give you 3 ideas to work with here. How to keep yourself from having angry outbursts and hurting yourself and others with them. The first one is kind of a take on, kind of a trite tip that you hear a lot of places. I've heard this a lot. If you're feeling angry, take 3 deep breaths or 5 deep breaths, or wait 30 seconds before you do something. There's something to that, because when you're feeling angry, that emotion can reach a peak, it can crest, and then it will diminish over time. Everything changes. And so you aren't going to feel at your peak anger forever. And so if you do give it some time, it is likely to fade. But I wanted to be a little bit more specific with this tip and say, if you're really feeling worked up and angry, that's a good time to refrain from sending that text or sending that email or making that phone call or having that conversation that you want to have in order to give someone a piece of your mind. Okay? You'll likely regret that action. Okay? And a good tip that I use is, if I'm writing an email and I'm thinking to myself, yes, this is perfect. I'm really going to get them with this, right? They're going to be sorry they did X, Y, and Z when they read this. That's a pretty good sign that you're writing something from anger, and you'll probably end up doing something that you'll regret if you do that. So at a minimum, if something happens today, tomorrow, and you sit down and you write your this manifesto email giving someone a piece of your mind. Sleep on it. Come back to it in the morning. See if that's still the approach that you want to take to resolving this dispute with someone. There might be a better way. Okay? So, the second tip is, in order to not bottle anger up, express it. But what I'd like to suggest is that rather than expressing your anger by being angry, yelling, screaming, extending certain fingers on your hand, instead of doing these things, go meta with it. What I mean by that is, rather than acting from anger, express that you're angry. I'm feeling angry now, right? And beyond that, you can use something called an I statement. When you blank, I feel blank. Really simple. It's really short to the point, and it just provides the facts, okay? Just straight across the plate. When you phrase emotional statements in this format, when you blank, I feel blank, they tend to be more likely to be received well by the other person. Because if you come in yelling and screaming, giving someone a piece of your mind, people pick up on that right away, their defenses go up, and once that happens, they're not listening. More likely they're going to be thinking about what their response to you is going to be, rather than listening to what you're actually saying. So it's strategic to word things in an I statement format. Now you could say, when you blank, I feel angry. That would be one approach. On next week's video, we're going to go a little bit deeper, because we'll be looking at what it is, what is the vulnerability, what is the unmet need or the unexercised ability of yours that is giving rise to the anger in the first place. And ideally, you would address that in the conversation that you have with the person and in that I statement. But for starters, you can just say, I'm angry right now. Or, when you do this, I feel angry. Okay? Give that a shot. And I bet that you'll receive a better reception than if you start yelling and screaming. And the third tip I wanted to give you is to start to develop a mindfulness meditation practice. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I'm really big on mindfulness meditation. I've been practicing it myself for, 25 years maybe, 30, somewhere in there. And I'm a teacher of it as well. And in a nutshell, mindfulness meditation, if you don't know, is, you could say it's the cultivation of three things: awareness, curiosity, and acceptance of your unfolding moment-to-moment experience of life. And one of the things that mindfulness does is orient our mental activity away from that reptilian brain that reacts like this at a moment's notice to get rid of pain and seek pleasure, and orients our mental activity toward our uniquely human brain, which is much more responsive instead of reactive. So it takes a longer view of your well-being. That's where that core self of yours resides. That's where those uniquely human needs and capacities reside, and those lead you to the kind of life you want in the long run. Mindfulness meditation orients us more to those parts of the brain and away from the reptilian brain. And so doing this has a couple of benefits. For one thing, the more you practice mindfulness, the more you will be more mindful in your everyday life, and not just when you're meditating. And this is really good, because the more mindful you are, the more aware you are of your present moment experience. And so you may notice that when you feel angry, there's an emotional component, but there's also a physical component. You know, your heart might start beating faster, your face might get flush, you might get hot, etc. Sometimes these signs appear before you realize you're angry. And in fact, sometimes you react to the anger before you realize that you're angry. So what mindfulness does is slows this process down a bit so that you can notice the signs of anger and have an awareness of the fact that you are angry. And that's really important, because when we just react out of anger, then essentially we've become anger itself, rather than a human being that is just experiencing the emotion of anger. Okay? And when you have that space between the experience and the response, you now have a choice for what to do next. Okay, you're back in the driver's seat. Okay, so through mindfulness practice, really we come to a truer relationship to our anger and all of our emotions and our experience of life in general. So there's lots of benefits to it. If you'd like to read more about mindfulness, you can head over to my website at rightlifeproject.com, and on the blog, search for Mindfulness 101, and I have an extensive article there that will give you all the information that you might be looking for as a beginner. And I also have several guided meditations on my website, ranging from 15 minutes up to, I think, 40 minutes. So if you're new to mindfulness, try one of the 15-minute ones. I've got a 15-minute breath meditation and a 15-minute body scan on the website, and they're both great introductory practices to the world of mindfulness meditation. Okay, so those are my tips for today. And again, these are the top-down tips. These are the behavioral interventions. What to do if you're feeling angry. Of course, mindfulness is some of both, because mindfulness can help you cope with the emotion once you're having it, and over time can really help us do the work that I'll talk about in the next video, which is looking at why we are getting angry in the first place. Okay, where's that discomfort coming from? Because really we can go to the source then and nip this process of emotional blow-ups in the bud and feel better in the long run as a result. Okay, so that's what I have for you today. If you like this video, please go down here and click like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I've got lots more videos headed your way. So, and of course, please visit my website too at rightlifeproject.com. And there I have some free downloads for you in addition to those guided meditations. And so you're welcome to make use of those as you wish as well. Okay, so I will see you next week. And until then, best of luck in your process of thriving from the inside out. Take care.